The young woman stood frozen in the gleaming corporate lobby. Her chest rose and fell with panic. The clock on the wall read 10:17 a.m. She was 17 minutes late. 17 minutes late to the interview that was supposed to change her life. Her hands trembled as she clutched her worn leather folder. Around her, sharply dressed applicants waited with perfect poise, their expensive suits and polished shoes gleaming under the chandelier lights. Meanwhile, her simple skirt and blouse told a very different story. Security guards whispered, the receptionist looked at her with pity, and somewhere, behind the tinted glass doors of the executive office, the CEO she was supposed to meet was probably already moving on to the next candidate. Her chance was slipping away. And the cruelest irony? She wasn't late because she overslept. She wasn't late because she was careless. She was late because she stopped to help a stranger. But not just any stranger. A man who, at that very moment, was about to decide her entire future. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We share stories like this every week, stories that remind us that kindness is never wasted, and sometimes the smallest choice rewrites your destiny. Her name was Naomi Okafor, 22 years old, a dark-skinned young woman with natural coils pulled neatly into a bun. Her clothes were simple, but pressed with care, her shoes scuffed but clean. She had grown up being told she didn't belong in places like this, that her skin, her background, her accent, none of it fit the image of the powerful, polished corporate world. But Naomi had something those other applicants didn't. She had fire. She had dreams. And she was ready to prove every single one of her doubters wrong. That morning, she left her tiny apartment 2 hours early, determined not to be late. She rehearsed answers in her head as she walked toward the bus stop, her folder clutched tightly against her chest. But fate had other plans. Halfway down the street, she saw him, an older man in a wrinkled shirt, hunched over near the curb. His shopping bag had spilled, oranges rolling into the road, and he clutched his chest in pain. Naomi froze. People passed by quickly, pretending not to see. Some glanced, shook their heads, and kept walking. She looked at the time. Her bus was coming in 3 minutes. If she helped him, she would miss it. If she missed the bus, she'd miss the interview, her dream, or a stranger's life. She didn't even hesitate. "Sir, are you okay?" she cried, rushing over. She knelt, gathering the spilled fruit and slipping an arm around his shoulder. The man groaned, pale and sweating. My heart." Naomi's voice shook as she flagged down a taxi. "Hospital, now!" she told the driver, helping the man inside. For 30 minutes, she sat with him in the emergency room until a nurse wheeled him away. The doctors thanked her. The man, weak but grateful, squeezed her hand. "Thank you, child. You don't know what this means." But Naomi did know. It meant her dream was gone. By the time Naomi reached the corporate headquarters, her throat was tight with dread. The building towered above her like a castle made for people who didn't look like her, didn't come from where she came from. Inside, she explained to the receptionist that she had an interview with Mr. Richard Caldwell, the CEO. The woman's polite smile faltered when she saw the time. "You were scheduled for 10 a.m. It's already past 10:15, she said. "I'm afraid Mr. Caldwell doesn't usually tolerate lateness." Naomi's heart sank. "Please, it wasn't carelessness. There was a man. He needed help. Please, just give me a chance to explain." But before she could finish, the door to the executive office swung open. Out stepped a tall, stern man in his 50s, silver hair slicked back, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed power. His sharp blue eyes swept the room, landing on Naomi with a flicker of irritation. "Another late candidate?" he muttered. "Send her home. We need people who respect time." The applicants snickered. One whispered, "Figures. She doesn't belong here anyway." Naomi's face burned. Humiliation washed over her. She wanted to scream that she had sacrificed everything for this moment, that she had given up her chance because she couldn't walk past someone in need. But she stayed silent. She lowered her gaze, clutched her folder, and turned to leave. She didn't see it, the way Mr. Caldwell's eyes lingered on her, the faint recognition in his expression. Because only an hour earlier, she had saved his life. She had no idea the stranger she helped on the street wasn't just any man, but the CEO she had come to meet. And in the next moment, her entire world was about to shift in a way she could never have imagined.
Naomi walked toward the glass doors, each step heavy with defeat. She could hear the faint laughter of the other candidates behind her, like daggers in her back. The receptionist called out softly, "I'm sorry," but it only stung more. Her dream had slipped away. But then, wait. The voice was commanding, deep, and filled the lobby. Everyone froze. Naomi turned slowly to see Mr. Richard Caldwell, the billionaire CEO himself, standing rigid, his sharp eyes fixed on her. For a moment, silence. No one breathed. Then he stepped forward. His gaze was unreadable, almost conflicted. Mr. Caldwell studied her face, his jaw tightening. And then, in a voice low enough for only her to hear, he murmured, "You're the girl from this morning." Naomi blinked in confusion. "What?" He straightened, his tone sharp again. "Follow me." Gasps filled the lobby as he turned on his heel and walked back into his office. Naomi hesitated, her stomach twisting. The other candidates stared, their smug expressions crumbling into envy. She clutched her folder and followed. The room was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows, shelves lined with awards, a polished mahogany desk at the center. Naomi stood awkwardly as Mr. Caldwell closed the door behind her. He turned, eyes softer now. "This morning," he said quietly, "you saved me. I was on my way to the office when I collapsed. You got me to the hospital." Naomi's breath caught. Her mind raced back to the pale man clutching his chest, the one she thought was just an ordinary stranger. "That was you?" she whispered. Caldwell gave a wry smile. "I guess we both had an appointment at 10 a.m. One of us arrived late for a very good reason." Naomi's knees almost buckled. All this time, she had sacrificed her dream to help a man, only to realize he was her dream. But then his expression hardened again. "Tell me, Miss Okafor, do you know what it takes to work in this company? Do you know what it takes to sit at this table?" Naomi swallowed hard. "Hard work, discipline, integrity." "Wrong," he snapped. "It takes sacrifice." He leaned closer, his voice like a blade. "You gave up your interview to save a stranger. Admirable, yes. But in business, sacrifice can cost you everything. Why should I hire someone who doesn't know when to walk away?" Naomi's heart pounded. His words were cruel, dismissive, and yet wasn't he testing her? She lifted her chin, her voice steady. "Because if I can't sacrifice for people, I have no business leading people. A company isn't just numbers, Mr. Caldwell, it's lives, and I'd rather lose this job than lose myself." Silence. For a long moment, his piercing gaze searched her face. Then something rare happened. The billionaire smiled. "Sit down, Miss Okafor," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Naomi sat, hands trembling as she opened her worn folder. She expected him to glance at her papers, maybe dismiss her again. But he didn't look at the folder. He looked at her. "You remind me of someone. My mother. She worked as a waitress. People dismissed her because of her skin, her accent, her clothes. But she had more dignity than every man who ever tried to look down on her. You have that same fire." Naomi's throat tightened. She bit her lip to keep from crying. "So here's my question," Caldwell continued. "Are you ready to prove those people out there wrong?" Naomi met his gaze. Her voice was firm, unwavering. "Yes, more than anything." What Naomi didn't know was that this moment wasn't just an interview. It was the beginning of a test far bigger than she ever imagined. A test that would pit her kindness, her intelligence, and her courage against forces that would do anything to see her fail. And in just a few hours, she would face the cruelest humiliation of her life. But what her enemies didn't realize was that Naomi was no ordinary girl. Naomi thought her heart couldn't pound any faster, but she was wrong. Within an hour of sitting across from Mr. Caldwell, she was summoned into the executive boardroom, a place where dreams were either made or destroyed. The room was lined with tall glass windows, sunlight pouring in, reflecting off the polished marble table. Around it sat a dozen men and women in tailored suits, their eyes sharp and calculating. Naomi's worn folder looked embarrassingly out of place against the gleaming laptops and pristine portfolios. At the head of the table, Mr. Caldwell sat with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. "This," he announced, "is Miss Naomi O'Coffer. She'll be presenting her vision for our outreach division." Gasps rippled through the room. One executive, a tall man with graying hair and a sneer plastered across his face, scoffed. "Her? She's not even an applicant. Caldwell, are we seriously wasting our time?" Naomi's palms grew damp. Whispers spread like wildfire. She heard the words, "charity case. She won't last 5 minutes. Another diversity stunt." Caldwell raised a hand for silence. "Every great leader begins as an underdog. Let's see if she can handle the fire." Naomi stood, her knees weak, but her spirit burning. She began to speak, her voice shaky at first, but steadier with each word. She talked about community, about giving struggling families a chance. She spoke about dignity, about potential buried under poverty, about how opportunity could transform lives. But as she spoke, the executives smirked, exchanged notes, even rolled their eyes. Finally, one of them, Mr. Whitmore, the sneering man, cut her off. "Miss O'Coffer, that's a nice speech, but this is business, not a charity. Do you even understand numbers? Or are you here to make us all feel guilty?" Laughter bubbled around the table. Naomi froze, the sting of humiliation sharp. For a moment, doubt clawed at her. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe they were right. But then her mind flashed back to her mother, working 2 jobs, always saying, "Never let anyone tell you you're less. Your worth isn't up for debate." Naomi straightened. Her voice cut through the laughter. "You asked if I understand numbers? Let me give you one. 40%. That's how much your public image has dropped in the last year because you've forgotten the people who make this company possible. You don't need pity, you need loyalty. And loyalty is built on trust. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the ones who don't belong here." The room went silent. The silence didn't last long. Mr. Whitmore's face turned red with fury. He slammed his folder shut. "Enough of this nonsense! Caldwell, this is a waste of time. She doesn't belong in this boardroom. She doesn't even belong in this building." The executives murmured in agreement, some nodding eagerly. Naomi felt their rejection wash over her again, but this time she didn't crumble. Because at that exact moment, Mr. Caldwell spoke. "Funny," he said coolly. "When I collapsed this morning, not a single one of you stopped to help me. Not one. But this young woman, who didn't know who I was, who had everything to lose, chose compassion over ambition." He turned his gaze toward Naomi, then back to the board. "So tell me, who belongs here more? The ones who worship numbers, or the one who understands people?" Naomi's chest tightened. She felt the weight of the moment. The humiliation had turned into something else, respect, at least from him. The executives sat frozen, torn between their pride and their CEO's authority. But behind their silence, Naomi could see it, their hatred growing, their resentment festering. And she was right. Because that night, while Naomi celebrated her small victory,
A plan was already being whispered in dark corners of the company. A plan to destroy her reputation before it ever had the chance to grow. Naomi had no idea. The real fight was just beginning. The next morning, Naomi walked into the building with her head held high. She thought the hardest part was behind her, but what she didn't know was that her enemies had already set the trap. Whispers spread through the office halls before Naomi could even settle into her first day. Executives whispered loudly enough for her to hear. She forged her resume. She tricked the CEO. She's only here because of her skin. Every word felt like a dagger. She smiled on the outside, but inside, her spirit shook. By lunchtime, an anonymous email had leaked across the company. It accused Naomi of lying about her education, of staging her act of kindness to Caldwell, even of stealing. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends outside the company. "Naomi, is this true? Your name's all over the blogs." Her stomach dropped. The humiliation she thought she had left behind was now back, magnified. That evening, Naomi sat alone in the lobby, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She had given everything she had, her kindness, her courage, and it was being twisted into poison. But then a voice broke through the silence. "Naomi." She looked up. It was Caldwell. He studied her face for a long moment before sitting beside her. His tone was softer than she'd ever heard. "Do you know why they hate you?" Naomi shook her head, her voice trembling. "Because I don't belong here." He shook his head firmly. "No. They hate you because you remind them of what they're not. They see in you what they lost a long time ago. Integrity." Naomi blinked, stunned. Then he stood, his voice turning steel. "Come with me. It's time they hear the truth." The next morning, Caldwell called an emergency company-wide meeting. The entire executive floor filled the grand auditorium. Cameras were rolling, reporters buzzing. It wasn't just employees watching. The world was watching. Caldwell stepped onto the stage with Naomi at his side. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One executive whispered sharply, "He's finished." But then Caldwell spoke. "Yesterday, someone in this company tried to destroy a young woman's life. They spread lies, hoping to bury her voice. But what they didn't count on was that I was there." He gestured to Naomi. "This young woman saved me, not because she knew I was the CEO, not because she wanted anything in return. She did it because it was right. And if that is weakness, then we need more of it." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Naomi's chest rose and fell, her hands trembling. Then Caldwell leaned closer to the microphone. His next words cut like a blade. "And if anyone here still believes she doesn't belong, I suggest you leave now, because I'd rather build an empire with her than keep it with any of you." The silence cracked into applause. First hesitant, then thunderous. Employees stood, cheering, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Naomi's own tears blurred her vision, but this time they weren't from shame. They were from triumph. She had been humiliated, underestimated, mocked. But now she stood tall on a stage she never imagined, beside the most powerful man in the building, because she chose kindness over ambition. Caldwell turned to her with a rare smile. "Welcome to the team, Naomi. Let's change the world." It seemed Naomi had won. The applause filled the air, and her enemies shrank in their seats. But deep in the shadows of the boardroom, Mr. Whitmore's cold eyes burned with hatred. His lips curled into a smile, not of defeat, but of calculation. Because he knew something Naomi didn't, a secret from her past, one that could shatter everything.